let's talk about the Kickstarter, shall we?
Sure. Yeah, let's do
Um,
it.
so obviously you're working with Matt Barker. I'm doing
Mhm.
a little bit of writing for it. I'm going to share the screen up here a little bit so
Mhm.
we can display the gloaming swamps. So
Oh, I have to say, I completely see your inspiration with the labyrinth and dark crystal in some of your work.
yeah,
When Matt was showing some of these things to me, I have tryptophobia, which means I am a little terrified by a bunch of consecutive holes like fungi, which is funny because I love fungi, but
sure.
some of your work really freaked me out
Like
in
this
a
guy.
good way. Like it triggered me in a good way because that means you did a great job enough for my own brain to be like, ah,
Yeah, I'm drawing a lot of bamboo related stretch goals. And bamboos have concentric rings, and then I'm tying them together in the same place, and so doing lines with rings down them and everything. I find it really cathartic, to be honest. I love, and because a big part of these campaigns, like, with the gloaming especially, like I've had a really clear idea of what the gloaming is, but then Matt Barker, who really wants to make sure that his client base, not client, his customer base, um, and their gaming needs are really met as well. And he's like, well, and he's always wanted to make some cool bamboo stuff. And initially, I'm like, oh, I don't see bamboo in the gloaming, but then I wrap my head around it and I start drawing my idea of how bamboo would be used in the gloaming. And it's like, why wouldn't bamboo grow in the gloaming? This is how they'd use bamboo in the gloaming. These look great. I'm so glad you told me to put bamboo in the gloaming, you know?
yeah,
And that's what I love about the collaborative process. And that's what I'm really getting out of working with Matt Rauscher. It's funny because if we'd be doing the exact same thing like 10 years ago, I'd be like, no, it's my vision, whatever. But you sit on the gloaming for a while and then you realize it's like, well, what's best for this IP? What's best for the product? What's best for the project? And and it's like, well, it's not a book that's on the shelf where people are going to be like, you know, Gimli never wore a helmet. Gimli had a yellow hood. It says here on page 242. Why has Gimli got a helmet in this movie? It's like, as opposed to going, wow, I love what they did with Gimli's helmet. That's a cool take on Gimli. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
one of those is really the better way to go, you know? Um, you know,
I've since joining you guys on these projects, I have been blown away by I mean, and we've spent countless hours just talking about the gloaming,
mm,
designing the world and bringing it all together in a cohesive story to bring to a tabletop game. And the the thing that immediately struck me was you already have like there is this minutia of story behind every character, behind every every location in the world, and it just to me that I find that stuff very interesting. The world building is something I always loved about Dungeons and Dragons, and going back to the 80s, I started my personal homebrew world in Dungeons and Dragons. I started the first iteration of it came out of the 1980s, and and it's evolved since then. And for me, it's got it's a kind of a rich tapestry. But what I experienced since working with you is the gloaming is going to be something really special as things unfold. And this Kickstarter here is just the first tip of the iceberg of this universe that Johnny has really poured his heart and soul into. Nearly 20 years in the making, really, and uh,
mm,
and it shows. I think people, especially if they start with this Kickstarter, I'm writing the very first introductory adventure for the gloaming, for the Kickstarter. So not only are you going to end up with a bunch of terrain and miniatures, characters, but you're also going to have that first taste of the world to experience what these characters are all about. And
Well, that's been kind of one of the hardest parts in some ways, is that this is probably like 1/18 of the Gloaming in a way. These campaigns, this is my fourth or fifth one with Matt Barker with Printable Scenery, but these take a phenomenal amount of investment, both in money and labor and hours. We've got a big team of people. It takes a huge amount of work just to get this, and so we really have to be, we have to be really selective of what, and the Gloaming in some ways was a risk, or a tactical risk, in the sense that we could do really straightforward generic castle buildings that everyone can use, but like the Gloaming had the potential of throwing people off, in the sense it's like, I've got to know what the Gloaming is to play this. It's like, not at all. We just thought swamps was a really interesting. Everybody needs swamps, and
for sure.
we used the Gloaming as a way to make the greatest swamp terrain available, and I believe we achieved that. It really is. No one's done swamps this well, but there's swamps in the Gloaming, and the Gloaming has really cool characters and plots and themes behind it. So we thought this would be a really good opportunity, because Matt and I've been working for some time. We're developing the Gloaming into various Dungeons and Dragons books and assets, and so we thought, well, let's be brave and introduce it to the world now, and because we've been working on it for so long, and we even thought about just not calling this the Gloaming and stuff like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a word, and we're really excited to get these creatures and these ideas out to the world, and we wrapped in a really amazing immersive swamp campaign around it. And for me, like, it's everything has been drawn with the Gloaming in mind. And to me, the world of the Gloaming, like, I see it as like an eco-friendly version of the apocalypse, in the sense that, for me, the Gloaming, in terms of kind of like a vibe, it's like the movie Waterworld, or Mad Max Fury Road, or Cormac McCarthy's The Road. It's a dark place, but a nuclear bomb hasn't gone off, right? Like, what I mean is, like, all of these characters, they've got one pair of clothing they're patching up. There's no Kmart or Walmart, whatever you guys have. You know what I mean? Like, it's like every day is like, oh God, I made it through that day. It's like, I got something to eat today. I didn't get stomped on by a dryad or eaten by a nixie today. And it's like Mad Max Fury Road. It's like, what's the lifespan for those people begging for water outside of Morton Joe's place? Like, it's that kind of terrifying vibe. It just happens to be covered in moss. There's plenty of water. Oh, there's plenty of trees, but that's not a good thing. There's things in the water. There's things in the trees. So it's that same dark. It's as dark and dangerous as 40K.
Eerie.
Or the underworld of Coruscant, or whatever. It's Mos Eisley Cantina over a globe, but it just happens to be in a forest, which is somewhere that I'd rather be playing anyway. So so that kind of twisted, like, rooty look, and that kind of like, anything can basically eat you sort of thing. There's all sorts of going on in there, but also, if you like the swamp creatures and can stick them into your campaign, the word Gloaming never has to affect your gameplay. These will become really, really worthwhile and really valuable later on when we have a book, or anyone can see these and go, man, I could. I don't see that as a dryad, but that could be an Ent army, or I need something like that in my D&D. They're just assets to benefit your gameplay. It's like, man, those trees are great.
Useful.
It's just really useful. Everything in this is the most useful, cherry-picked things out of the Gloaming that can universally serve you as a DM or a game player, or just as a model maker.
And that's what I was going to say too, is that regardless if you're interested in immersing yourself in the world of the Gloaming, which personally, now that I've had a close-up look at it, I don't know why you wouldn't, but the pieces here, are fantastic. Whether you need tree ant models, whether you need swamp terrain, or just really new and original monster figures. This Kickstarter has basically everything. This is a gloaming shambler, so it's kind of like a cross between a shambling mound and an earth elemental. You know, and the statistics we're putting together for all of these creatures are.
That's a good one to talk about, Matt, because the shambling mound, like most of the things in the gloamings are things that you would have seen on my desk 10, 15 years ago. But the shambling mound character there is a direct collab with me and Matt Rauscher, from the work we've been doing building this book and world up. Sometimes he'll suggest something, or like ideas we have kind of leapfrog over each other till they get to a point, and I was like, oh, I have to draw that. And like, so this, because we're working on the D&D supplement material, not only in conjunction with this, but completely adjacent to this as its own project, you know, like weekly meetings, and we're working on it all the time during, around, before and after this Kickstarter. That's all happening. The Shambling Mound was an idea I drew based on a collaboration of ideas with Matt Rauscher. As like, oh, I've got to draw that, and then Matt Barker sees it and goes, we've got to stick that in the campaign. I need that model. I love that model. Oops, I just turned my phone off there. That's actually Matt Barker calling. He knows I'm on a Zoom. Anyway, so like, and Matt's like, can we stick that in this campaign? It's like, if you want to get one of your modelers to make that, it's from the Gloaming, it fits in the Gloaming, and it fits beautifully into swamps. And he's calling me. So.
Yeah, it's it's been such a pleasure working with you and Matt. It's really been, each part is, each of us are contributing something, and the result is far greater than the sum of the parts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was worried about that to begin with, because I didn't know Matt Rauscher prior to going into this, and Matt Barker had talked about him over the years. Like, when we do this book, I've got to bring this guy on. And one thing he said is like, Matt's going to get really excited and get his own ideas and take it off in this direction. And at first I'm like, that's not what I want, But that's because like
you just went through that. You don't want to do that.
Just went through that, But like this, his tangents, Matt's ideas within the Gloaming, for me, something I was worried about has become like, I have a good idea of what the Gloaming is, but it's kind of like, I have a good idea of what Middle Earth is, right? But imagine if I got a ticket to Middle Earth and like Tom Bombadil said, I'll take you for a tour, I'd discover things about Middle Earth I never knew that excite me. And that's kind of like working with Matt. It's like, I'm now getting like a tour around this world that I created and I thought I knew, but I'm like, that's in there too. Wow, that's awesome. It's
I love that.
And I wasn't expecting that. And so, but he, it's the danger is he pushes you into this like almost lazy mode of this like, I know whatever he's going to write is going to be perfect for this thing. And I keep having, Johnny, you've got to check the Trello every day, and you've got to give feedback, and you've got to keep on top of it. Because at the start I was like, oh yeah, that's quite good. But now it's like anything that gets written, I know is perfect for the Gloaming. But the last couple of weeks have just, obviously when a Kickstarter's on, it's just a couple of months.
But that's the one thing too. I've been really fortunate that we do mesh so well, because one of the things that we talked about at the very beginning was that when we create these creatures, you might recognize some of the names, like Nixie, for example. There's a D&D Nixie out there, but these are Gloaming Nixies, and these are different. And not only is it something that's going to be unexpected from just a naming convention, so your players might hear Nixie and they'll have an image of something, but they're going to be very surprised with the how these creatures react and how they operate in a combat, because one of the first directives was we want to create creatures that are completely unlike anything that are in D&D or other related 5e products. We want them to be surprising and do unexpected things, and I think we've done a pretty good job so far of delivering that. I don't expect that to change anytime soon. I'm really happy how these things are coming out.
Well, that's one of the, being around Richard Taylor so much, and he's a close friend, as well as like a mentor and a benefactor and a boss. So he wears a lot of hats in a relationship. But nothing changed from me looking up to him as a teenager to me knowing him now close to 40. And I've been listening to Tony Robbins' personal power stuff since I was like a teenager, and he always talks about, like, if you admire someone, use them as a success coach, whether they know it or not. And the best thing I think I learned from Richard was, Richard can do everything within the company. He can sculpt, he can draw, he can weld, anything he can do. But rather than just go, no, it's got to be done like this, he's really good at taking it. And he used to drive me home a lot because we both lived in Haitaitai, and he'd share some of his wisdoms with me, But he really taught me how to, like, take a step back. It's like, we've hired that person to do this, we're not going to tell them how to do their job. And so I went into working with Matt kind of like, I'm not going to say, no, the gloaming has to be this or this. 10 years ago I would have been. It's like I had such a clear vision of the gloaming. But luckily, through experience and failings and successes and things I've learned through it, I just went into this with day one going, I've it may never be published, but I've written the gloaming as a 3-part novel, right? In terms of an exhibition, in terms of a world, I've succeeded in showing the world and the creatures I wanted the gloaming to be. And so as an exhibition, it's done its thing. As my book as a story, whether someone reads it or not, it's done its thing. But going into this, it's like, the primary goal isn't to service Johnny's idea of the gloaming. The primary goal is to now take the gloaming as an IP and make it the most workable and playable 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons asset as it can be. And keeping that in mind with everything, and that's why you get Matt Rauscher to do it as well, because he just knows everything. He is the book, he is the meat book. He just, he has it all in there. And so and so, like, he suggests things that I wouldn't have thought of originally, but it's like, but they're going to make it so much more fun to play and so much more interesting, so much more useful for a DM. Well, Matt, what would you say? I guess for me, I would say, like, designing the gloaming, like, even though it's a magical world as such, I always saw magical or magic as like a filthy word that I avoided. I always wanted it to be based in reality. When I look back on it, basically that's because I really wanted the gloaming to feel like a world that you could visit. I remember
a world
there's
of possibilities.
Yeah, and magic, like, magic doesn't exist, but
right.
But
so it's a bit limiting when you put magic into the world. I mean, it's wonderful and there's all these possibilities, but it's almost a little limiting to your imagination because it's a little bit far from reality.
Well, I also think, like, I think for me as a conceptual designer and world builder and storyteller, I've always felt magic closes more doors than it opens, because it's just anything goes. It's like the Harry Potter books are great, but I just hate that she put a time turner in it, because it just throws out everything she's established, and anything goes now. It's ridiculous,
Yeah.
And so as a point of reference, anyway, little things like that can throw me out. It's too even though I'm comfortable with wands and broomsticks and potions, a time turner, that's unrealistic. It's that kind of thing, And so Matt and I have been walking that line with the very few ideas I've had to say to Matt. It's like, that's too magical. And it's like, I get that. And so it kind of comes back to when I finally got, this is before the age of DVDs or the internet, and when I finally got Labyrinth on VHS for myself as a commercial copy, it came with the best documentary ever made at the end of it. I don't even know. I watched all the credits because I wanted to learn who'd made my favorite movie. Then all of a sudden this documentary starts, right? And Jim said this one thing in it where he's saying, he basically says that Labyrinth is allegorical and it didn't really happen, and it's kind of in Sarah's head, and it's a metaphorical movie about giving up your childhood self and growing into a young woman, which is a film he made for his daughters. And he's like, but if you want to see it as a real place, you can also. But I'm so what do you call it? I'm so, like, gospel when it comes to the original creator's vision that I remember feeling so disappointed that Jim didn't see Labyrinth as the place I saw it as, because it really felt like, if, maybe one day I might get abducted and taken to the Labyrinth, like, because I guess because it's so hand sculpted and everything's in camera under real lighting, nothing's actually fake, even though it's a fake world. Other
Yeah.
than the Labyrinth reconfiguring itself, there wasn't much magic in the Labyrinth.
Mhm.
And so like, even as a kid, even though I knew Fraggles and Wombles were puppets, I'd still kind of look for them in the garden. Like, there's something about tactile magic. And so I wanted the Gloaming to, just for me, if anyone else, it was important that the Gloaming, that's why everything is based in mythological folklore. I wanted there to be this kind of, whether it's a dimension or a part of the world as yet undiscovered in a Skull Island kind of way, I wanted to feel like all of our folklore and mythology have come from the creatures in the Gloaming that people have seen before through various means and have tried to explain. And now we have the descriptions of them, but this is actually their true genus. And because of that as a primary conceptual design clause over what I drew for the Gloaming, there's no metal. Nobody has a belt buckle or a steel sword, because that means that they can mine. And I can't imagine any of the creatures in the Gloaming having a system or a culture or technological advancements strong enough to be able to set up a system where they can mine and process ore. So of course they wouldn't have metal. And so
That's very detailed of you.
well, once you take out metal, it completely directs your design decisions down. Like, I want to build the troll wagon, but there's no nails, and also the wood can't be milled because there's no saws, and so that leads me down this design aesthetic path. That if I could, they've got a mill, they've got nails. I'm just going to make this cool steampunk thing. So why is it steampunk? Where are they getting the steam? How do they know how to process steam? Is that copper? Is that steel? Where are they getting the copper and the steel from? Like, once you figure out the world to that kind of depth, so the more I took magic out of the Gloaming, the more real the Gloaming is, the more interesting my decisions were. And for me, D&D and fantasy, it's just so easy, and it's such a quick fix for people to just throw in. It's like, oh, there's a flying ship. How does it fly? It doesn't matter. It looks cool though. It's like that's because I'm so driven with conceptual design. And so when it came time to, like, Matt saying, well, I imagine these people have this spell. At first I was a little bit, but then once he really got the Gloaming and knew how to, as long as it's thematic and it works within this book, it's like, I just had to put aside, I didn't want to put this 5th edition monster manual and the campaign we're developing into I don't want to back it into a corner, and I didn't want to take away the fun or playability from it just because in my 20s I had a very strong vision of a low-tech, grungy fairy world. And so we've been meeting in the middle of that to make it the most playable game while still staying true to the conceptual vision, I guess, of the place.
And that's really been the challenge, is to keep that magical feel without being too overtly magic. And I spent a lot of time on a lot of these monsters as we've been developing their statistics, trying to figure out ways of avoiding magic but making them competitive in a 5e game, because 5e characters are loaded for bear with magic and all kinds of things to ruin the day of creatures in the Gloaming. But I think we've come up with some pretty creative ways of keeping them on their toes. And
Matt, would you say that constraint I've loosely imposed on you has driven you to more interesting creative decisions?
Oh, absolutely. I think so. Yeah.
So that's the magic of that,
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that people are going to be very happy when they see the finished product. And of course, this is the first of hopefully many dives into the Gloaming rabbit hole. And I'm very excited for this. It's been such a pleasure working with you. I can't say that enough, because I've published monster manuals in the past and mini adventures in the past, and with the exception of one project, I've always just kind of worked on my own, and there is a certain satisfaction to getting a job done and getting it out there. But I've always been a person who much more prefers to be collaborative. I think for me, I think it brings out the best work possible when, you know, you have everyone kind of pushing one another and, you know, stretching their mind and for example, you know, I think last week was a good example where we were talking about, you know, creating the statistics for these fellas here. And I had a finished product, and Johnny was like, well, you know, what if we pulled out this spell? What would we do to the entire makeup of it? And then I had to start thinking about, well, if we did that, we're going to have to find a way of making him competitive in a different way. And I think we succeeded in that.
That's the funny thing is, like, I've also got to kind of pinch myself in the sense that, like, I'm working in a world where like a magic light shining through the eye holes of a magic mask gave consciousness to a piece of moss that grew up big enough to wear the mask and crawl down the tree and bring life to other creatures, right? But I'm also like, Matt, that character can't turn into mist. That's silly, you know. You know, not silly, but it's like that's the small step over the line in the sand for me. But it's very hard for me to describe why one thing seems too magical and the other one just fits into the world. But Matt, you know, gets that without needing like a thesis on it, you know. But it's an interesting, like, the thing of creating one small idea developing into quite a big part of something always interests me. Like when I was working on Guillermo's Hobbit, originally I said, it's like, Guillermo, Tom Waits has to be the voice of Smaug, and he's like, but he already had his casting for Smaug, and it's like, okay, and then I came back, it's like, Guillermo, Tom Waits has to be the main goblin, and he's like, I love that idea, but I'm going to film the head goblin practically, and so it's going to have to be like some 20-year-old bodybuilder, because he's going to be in a massive bodysuit on set for 3 weeks under studio lights. Tom Waits is like 65. It's not going to happen. I'm like, good point, right? And then I had one last try. I was like, oh no, and then I gave up, right? But then he comes back to me one day at my desk, and he's like, you know, Johnny, I think Tom Waits does belong in Middle Earth. Why don't we make him a dwarf? And then so we came up with this idea of this like toy making dwarf, and that's how they sell toys on their long road to nowhere, you know, a little toy maker. And so, okay, I've got to design a toy making dwarf based on Tom Waits, right? And so I started like putting a beard on Tom Waits and stuff. And I thought, well, if he's like dwarven toys, they'd only be made of wood, but you'd probably wind something up and they'd do something incredible, because dwarves are very clever,
right?
Even with low technology. And so, like, if he's got all these tools and he's finicky and he's all clockworky in the head, which, you know, Del Toro loves. And also he's got to walk through Mirkwood and get tangled and, you know, all that stuff. So I started plaiting his beard and putting it behind him, and everything came up into this top knot like this. They just got everything out of the way, but it was done in an intricate way that worked with like dwarven Celtic weaving and all this kind of stuff. And like, it's great, it's in the movie. And then that sat on a shelf. And then when Peter Jackson took over, and we recast everything, I found out Mark Cadlow was going to be in it, right? Mark Cadlow taught me drama when I was a kid, because New Zealand's that small, and I've always loved Mark Cadlow as an actor. He's the best Herod in any Jesus Christ superstar. And Rick Mayall, who's one of my favorite actors, played Herod, and Mark Cadlow's even better than that. So he's this great actor, right? And so I just took Tom Waits' face out, and I put Mark Cadlow's face in, and I resubmitted it as a new design. And it got completely in the film without any changes, right? The thing is, when Peter Jackson showed Mark Cadlow the image that I'd done of Dory, he didn't know the backstory about a toy maker, or he didn't know my idea of that he'd probably get it out of the way if he's traveling through Mirkwood. He just saw a dwarf with a beard that obviously took a couple hours to do each morning. So he thought he must be a very finicky character. So based on the concept design I'd done of his beard, he decided to play Dory like this. So who is his idea of a finicky character based on him watching Coronation Street. He based it on a character, Vera Duckworth. And, little cup of wine, Gandalf. Oh, I shouldn't be doing that. And so the whole character you see in the movie came out of me designing how a dwarf's beard should be plaited, and the actor taking that as a through line into his performance. And so when you do overthink every little design, more often than not, somewhere down the line, it feeds into an interesting, especially in collaborative forms, it feeds into interesting things you never would have expected. Because when I look at my concept design, I'm imagining, you mug, come here, what you say? All right, let's get him, right? But he saw it as the absolute opposite, more of a feminine sort of thing. And he played it that way. And it's like, okay, well, that works. There's enough burly football playing dwarves in that party. Let's have a prissy one,
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, so I'm always quite pleased when things take on a life of their own. But yeah, so by the time we get this video posted, there will still be time to get into the Kickstarter, and I'm real excited for this one. Johnny was recently on Tested. Is it Adam Savage's YouTube show, and had a chance to show off some nice pieces of Breckencourt. But I guess is it Breckencourt? What's the name of it? The full name?
Oh, Breckencourt Keep.
That's right.
Look, that's just a fun name because things need names when you download them, or something. Like it can become many different structures however you need it to be. If you've got a place in your campaign, I don't expect people to get caught up on like it having to be we're obviously showing kind of a medieval swamp setting, but I'm going to be using this for Dagobah, and my Star Wars campaign is going to be set a lot on Ortolan and Ithorian, so different planets in the galaxy that are going to require swamp kind of stuff, and also like you put these hills on grass, and it's Fangorn Forest. It's not a swamp. You can use it. I'll be using it in Middle Earth gaming and all sorts of stuff.
It's got infinite uses for
so
sure.
do you think we are going to see more parts of the Gloaming that are going to come out?
Absolutely. I mean, it was kind of based on the success of this. Like I said, it was a risk. It would have been very easy for us to do what everyone else is doing and just go for the easy picking, low hanging fruit. Everybody wants a castle. Everybody wants a building, and we're going to be doing more of that stuff, but in a more original, interesting way as best we can. But it's always a tactical risk to go really original when you're selling a product. Like I always thought it would be the opposite. I've learned so much like running a business in the last 5 years. Like as much as I say I make this stuff for myself, which I do, my tastes are eclectic because they're mine. They're formed out of like all of my experiences and interests and nature and nurture and all that kind of stuff,
Right.
For the same reason that I don't get a lot out of Marvel movies or Avatar, but the bulk of the world does, or something. Like I'm there's a part of me that's switched differently, that or I think Labyrinth is a far superior movie to the whole Hobbit trilogy or something, but one cost way more money and made way more money. Things are triggered differently in my head, you know what I mean? And so like when I make the ultimate set for me, that's going to appeal to X amount of people. And so it's a testament to Matt Barker, who sees the Gloaming and sees it as a vision he wants to invest in and help bring to the world, rather than playing it safe and so we will see more Gloaming, because this is seems to have found an audience, and like, you know, the comments for both this and the tested video are just, you know, quite overwhelming and
Yeah,
really, really
it's really amazing. I love the detail that you have in there. It's not like a lot of art that I've seen, but I do like how it is applicable to a lot of different things. I don't have to play it your way to appreciate and utilize the pieces that you've created.
Yeah, it is beautiful. And we really appreciate you coming on with us, Johnny. I wish we could talk a lot more. It is a lot longer. We could actually talk endlessly, but alas, we gotta move on to the next bigger and better thing. And so again, thank you so much, Johnny. The next bigger and better thing, I am 100% sure is going to be in the Gloaming too. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah,
But,
the monster manual we're working on is going, without bias, going to be the best monster manual ever put out there. And it's also like we've found a real cool style too with it, where it really is a celebration of art, as well as just convenient text. You know, like,
yeah.
I mean, I've got just a stack of White Dwarf magazines that I brought just for the images in it. You know, but
Yeah.
you know, like the visuals are so important, but obviously we're meeting in the middle of having really, really useful, accessible gaming stats and aids for both DMs and players. But like the book will completely drop you into the world in the same way like a filmic guide to Middle-earth would, or the Art of Zelda, or a guide to Skull Island, or whatever books, you know, we've already been workshopping it with people that have put together books for films and WETA and stuff like that. So even if you don't play D&D, it'll be basically like the art of Book of the Gloaming as well. You get a lot out of it.
Yeah, it'll be stunning. So I hope you all out there have enjoyed this great opportunity to speak with one of the greatest out there. Johnny Fraser Allen, thank you. Jacoya, as always, you're amazing. And until then, we hope you like, comment, subscribe, and we will catch you all later. Thank you so much.
Thanks.